welcome back to Alchemical Serenity, the podcast that takes you on a journey along the path, through the woods, across the fields and moors, down to the beach where we can sit around the campfire and talk about the path you were born to lead. I'm Carolyn, and I've been treading my spiritual path for over 40 years, and I hope this podcast gives you a path to walk down as I share my knowledge in a witchy, spiritual and druidy way. Everyone is different and every path is different, so my way might not be your way, and you may read from a book or be on a group and find a different way of doing things that feels comfortable for you. My advice is to follow your heart and your gut instinct, and if it doesn't feel right to you or the energies don't sit well, then don't do it. Find another way. There's always a way that works with your energy and is there to develop your spiritual path, and doors will open and you'll realize more about the life you were born to lead. So before we dive into the podcast, I have to tell you about something that happened last week. I was due to meet with a lady to discuss a joint business operation. It's only small, but it was just a few ideas we wanted to chuck around together. And we'd agreed to meet at a local garden centre, but despite me waiting for 15 minutes outside, she didn't turn up. I kept looking at people and wondered, oh no, is this the lady I was supposed to meet? Or had I got the date wrong? You know, people were walking in and out of the garden centre, and then there were other people standing around, and then they were meeting their friends, and I'm thinking, well, okay, it wasn't her. Oh, no, it's not her. I felt really quite uncomfortable because the staff were looking at me, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, they're watching me mooching about. Anyway, I don't think for a minute that the staff thought anything more strange about me standing outside than anybody else, but you do start to feel quite conspicuous, don't you? Anyway, I was just preparing to go back in and have a wander around the garden centre when I looked over to my right, and there, walking across the car park, is my friend Emily from Sulis. She pointed at me and I pointed at her, and we went, oh my God, hello. One of those moments. Well, she was killing time whilst waiting for her gorgeous little mini schnauzer to have her spa treatment day. It was a short back and sides, a bit of beef jerky treats at the dog groomers. And so Emily said, well, I'll wait for you for a few minutes here and we'll see if anybody turns up. Anyway, they didn't. And so she said, she fancied coffee. So we walked in, went to get a coffee and have a look round for some herbs and veggie plants. The bizarre thing was she had drove across, as she'd driven into the car park, she'd actually thought to herself, oh, I should have contacted and met Carolyn for a coffee. And there I am hanging around the front door. That's just, I love things like this. This is my kind of synchronicity. So when, an unplanned coffee date happens. Anyway, whatever happened to the lady I was meant to be meeting, I will never know. She hasn't contacted me or replied to any of my messages. I've been totally ghosted, but never mind. So whilst we were walking around the garden centre, I was explaining to Emily about how my next podcast was on a sacred space and altars, both indoors and outdoors. And just as I was doing this, I looked up at sort of where the plants were placed around some conservatory seating and said, oh, wow, look, there's a sacred space. Do you think we could just go and sit there and meditate? It was really one of those lovely moments when the sun was coming in and it was sort of caught all the plants in the furniture, and it looked like this beautiful little oasis that you wanted to go and sit in. And it was a beautiful moment of inspiration. And the day turned out, to be really great. I bought some mint and some chive plants from my herb garden and some sunflowers to grow for the wildlife. So today's podcast, as I've already said, giving my secrets away, is on creating a sacred space or an altar. So having a place to sit and meditate, reflect, a bit of peace and quiet, and to be able to hold that spiritual space is fairly high up on the spiritual list of things to do, as it gives us a place of focus and intent. When we go to this spiritual place, for whatever reason, our body, mind, and soul kicks into focus on what we need at that time. Now, that could be a meditation, prayers, blessings for something, a little intention or manifesting, or just a plain old download of the day to a deity or spirit guide listening in. Altars originated for our ancestors in local areas using maybe a tree, a stone, or a water spring. They came to be regarded as inhabited by spirits and gods or holy in some way. Our ancestors would have used a stone or maybe a mound of earth, and sacrifices did take place on altars where a victim would have been killed to appease the gods. Now, I'm not saying a victim was human, so don't panic. It could have been an animal of some sort. We know it happened. Altars in places such as Israel and the Middle East range from upright stones to great rectangular ones in the Egyptian temples. The ancient Greeks built altars at the entrances in their courtyards of the houses and also in the marketplaces and public buildings. The Romans had altars similar to the Greeks, where they would worship their particular gods or goddesses of the home, for example. It wasn't until the 3rd century that Christians began to use a table where the Eucharist or Mass could be celebrated. Now, the Eucharist is the service of bread and wine. As churches got bigger, so did their altars and also the items upon them. Sacred spaces don't have to be large scale. We don't have to go and build ourselves an Egyptian temple. We don't have to build ourselves a church. They are a personal thing. They are your containment of energy where you can go to be creative or energized. They come in all shapes and styles, but I do think an altar should be where you can personally see it. If you hide it away and have to open up a cupboard or even bring things out of a box to set up in an area every time you want to use it, this can defeat the object of what you're trying to do, because 9 times out of 10 will think, oh, I can't be bothered to get all that out. I'll just sit here on the sofa and try and meditate. And sadly, this kind of practice just doesn't work. And from experience, I have tried it. So having your altar or sacred space, even if it's just a couple of pretty stones or a shell, a candle, sitting in an area where you can see it and maybe light that candle or burn some incense, means you're devoting the intention to working some magical energy. Of course, there's no right or wrong way to set up your altar. Again, everything is about you and your intention. But I always feel if it's visible to your eye, you are more likely to spend some time in that beautiful sacred space. So firstly, the best thing to do is think of what type of sacred space or altar you want to have. Will it be indoors or outdoors or both? Are you dedicating it to a deity such as a goddess or a god, or both again, an animal, Buddha, the Fae? Will it be static and stay the same each month? Or do you plan to make little changes to suit the season or festivals that are happening? Do you plan to do any work with your altar or area, for example, candle magic, spell work, meditation? Once you know roughly what sacred space you want to create, then you need to think about how it's going to look. So are you planning on something very simple, just like a shelf? Where's it going to be? Where's the best place for you that you can put your sacred space? Perhaps a corner of the room where you can focus on it. Will it be larger on like a tabletop where you can be elaborate as needed? Do you want it to be visible to friends and family, or do you want to keep it hidden so it doesn't look so conspicuous? I've seen some lovely altars made from drop-down vintage antique desks, I must admit, and I have used that idea myself, but then that kind of shut it away. But it kind of shut it away from prying eyes and children. If you've got young kids, you don't want them getting involved in um, playing with any of your statues or candles. So if those sort of drop-down antique desks are really quite lovely for that purpose, because you can tuck everything inside, pull the leaf down, do your altar work and put it back up again. So let's look at some ideas for an indoor sacred space first. Now, over the years, I've had many different types. I currently have 3 indoor altars. Yeah, I know, overkill. Sounds a bit too extreme, but there is a reason. My first one has always been the largest. It holds my divine moon goddess, a candle for burning. It has available space to do a crystal grid, more candles, and more candles, space for anything I need to add on to it at the time. And I change the colours with the season and festivals. It's not overcrowded, so it allows me to have some flexibility. My second is a small shelf with other items on, and here I use the area if someone has passed away. So a photo will go up for a few weeks and I'll light a candle, say a prayer and dedication to them about their crossing over. And it leaves my main altar available for daily work. Since COVID and 2020, I actually have attended 3 funerals a year. So that shelf has had quite a lot of blessings going on. And it's nice to be able to say my goodbyes and send love to the spirit as they move on their journey. I also have a place that at Samhain, I add photos of my family. So that's it, you can use it for that purpose as well, for those who have crossed over if you wanted to. Although I only do 2 generations back on photos of great grandparents because I don't know whether they've already been reincarnated. So my third and small altar is a little bit of area on my desk. It's a circular brass tray and it holds 3 plants and currently a pewter hair for spring. I have a selenite wand, a couple of small amethyst crystals and a candle that I can light if I wish to, or just leave it there in my peripheral view. Also looking to build one in my garden. It's taken me a while to work out where I'd like it to be, as I have a very large south-facing garden. And in 2019, we had to have a lot of very old apple trees removed that were full of woodworm. So we got a professional tree surgeon in who recommended that they came down before they actually fell down and did some damage to the house. And it's taken 3 years for that land to settle. We've added more trees in. We've replaced the fruit trees with more, and have also grown some horse chestnuts, willow, oak, and ash, which might possibly add some to the garden at some stage. However, the garden is open to all the sun except for a large cherry tree in the centre and my neighbour's huge ash tree. So I'm sort of trying to find somewhere to sit in the garden under a tree or perhaps a pergola, which would be wonderful for meditations and any outdoor spell and energy work I want to do. And I suppose really just to go out with a cup of tea and a good book. I've seen some beautiful sacred spaces made from willow, where they take the lengths of the willow and they work it into a frame, and then eventually that grows and the leaves start to flourish and it becomes sort of a green dome and you can sit underneath it. Then over winter when the leaves have gone, you've just got that structure left behind, and I think they are amazing and they're fantastic for kids as well. So that was kind of another idea I had, but I haven't really worked out at the moment exactly how I want my sacred space outside to look. I have thought about some metal garden arches. I've seen some of them sort of placed in a row with lots of flowers growing over them, and I keep seeing different ideas in the garden centre going, oh, that will work. I'd like that idea. And then I find something else. So it's a work in progress. And, I'll get round to doing that at some point. My next suggestion is going to be using your journal. Now, this would be a great way to save your ideas for your altar. I've woken up in the middle of the night with some fantastic inspiration, turned over, gone back to sleep. By the morning, forgotten it completely. So I always now keep like a little journal for inspiration by the bed with the with the pen. Always make sure you have a pen. Then if I have a moment of brain fog, then because that is my best friend at the moment, I am of that age. The journal's there. I can write down my idea, go back to sleep again. So let's imagine for one moment you've decided what type of sacred space you want. You've done your research. You've been on Pinterest. You've journaled. And you're ready to create something. Your altar or sacred space is ultimately your spiritual focal point for your magical workings. And it's also a place where your inner and outer worlds will meet. The objects you place on your altar or in your sacred space will have a deep meaning for you personally. You may have a theme you want to work with. What are you going to put on your altar? Is your altar going to be devotional? So you may wish to have a representation of a god, a goddess, lord and lady. Then there are many different deities that you might want to work with as well. So for the hearth and home, deities that you could use if you wanted to. Now these are more based on the female side of energy because it's the hearth and home. Greek is Hestia. She's the daughter of Cronus and Rhea, and she was protection of family. The Roman goddess would be Juno, who was a guardian of the home, or Vesta, who was Hestia's counterpart. The Celtic would be Brigid, or Brige. She's the Irish pantheon. You've got the Cailleach for Scottish and Ceridwen for the Welsh. So that would depend on which of those three in the Celtic pantheon you're interested in. And if you're looking at Norse, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, you have Frigga. In the garden, the Roman goddess would be Anthea. She was the goddess of vegetables, gardens, and blossoms. Or Pomona was the goddess of fruit, trees, orchards. There is also Flora, who we spoke about in Beltane in my last podcast, and obviously about her festival. Greek pantheons, you've got Aphrodite of the garden. Celtic, you've got Danu for wisdom, magic, and gardens and fertility, nature and abundance, and Blodwyn as well. You could have Buddha if you're interested in having those lovely little Buddha statues. I've got one of those, not in my garden, but it's in my house. Because I like having the balance for me of Buddha being around at some time. Animals, what about animals? An animal that means something to you, stags, horses, cats, dogs. If you know your spirit animal, then this is obviously a really good choice. Birds as well, there's the fairies and angels. Oh, I mean, we could go on for ages, couldn't we? So you may find you want to go deeper into your spirituality, and rather than have a statue of a hearth and home goddess, you might want to work with a goddess of healing, for example, or a goddess of darkness, a moon goddess, Morgan Le Fay, Hecate, who is the goddess of witchcraft. The list is endless, but my advice is always to find something, as I say all the time, that connects to you and that you feel is all about you. There's four major elements as well, which are earth, air, fire, and water. Each of these can be represented by an object on your altar sacred space. So earth could be a stone or a crystal that you found. Air could be incense to burn. Fire is a candle, and water is a bowl of water. You could have plants and flowers, a crystal grid, more candles, and more candles, and more candles, and incense and more incense, and a bell for clearing energy. You may find something out on a walk, a shell on the beach, a leaf, a small twig, something in your own garden even. Even when you're out shopping, pottering around, you might find something that just speaks to you and you think, oh, that would be so nice on my altar. As long as the items that go on there are about you and they're there for you and your highest good, and they're there to work with and for you. If you have a garden, then this could be a really fun project to create a lovely area of zen and tranquility. If you haven't got a garden space or even allowed to do something in an open area because it's shared with others, then go for just a plant idea inside your house and create a little oasis of calm with plants in an area where you can just sit for a while. A friend of mine has a lovely back garden in London that he's allowed to use, but because he lives in an old house which has been converted into small apartments, he isn't the only one with access to the outdoor space, and he also isn't allowed to do anything with a garden. And it's become quite overrun with some huge trees, and he's desperate to create a nice area where they can all sit and use it, but his landlord won't let him. So if you don't have that space, use some space indoors. There's just a little corner you could make a beautiful area with lots of plants. So for now, let's assume you have your little area designated to sit near in the garden. It could be by the back door. Maybe that's the only bit of space that you have. So a couple of pots, a little patio area. If you've got a little bit more space and you've got a pergola to shield you from the sun, wherever you feel is the right place to sit and close your eyes, this is the place to use. Again, I've seen some fabulous ideas on my favourite place, Pinterest. So what do you want to do with your space? Will it double up as a friends and family space so that anybody that comes around for a barbecue at the weekend is also going to be sitting in that area? So in this outdoor space itself, you could have a fountain or a water feature, plants in both pots and gardens, rocks, pebbles, sand, statues. If you really want to, buy some gnomes. I saw some beautiful gnomes the other day, and I was really quite tempted to have a gnome garden or a gnome of my own. You knew that was coming, didn't you? Tell me you knew that was coming. Maybe you want some seating areas as well, where you can relax, do your meditation, and others would be able to use it. So hopefully by now you've got your journal out and you've written a few ideas down and thought, oh yeah, I could do that. This would work for me. If you haven't got a journal to hand, you can use your phone, stick something in notes, start something off there. If you've got a laptop or whatever, use that as well, or an iPad. There is nothing worse than a moment of inspiration being lost because, as always in my case, in my house, you couldn't find a bloody pen. My next thoughts are, will you create it yourself, or are you looking to do, if you have any spare cash, to having a garden makeover where you can choose to have someone come in and help you create that sacred space? The most simplest of altars are always the best. And if you're lucky to have a few garden centres in your area, then pop along for inspiration. Indoor and outdoor spaces in garden centres are designed to sell you that look after all. And even if you aren't in the market to go maxed out on your credit card, you can at least get some inspiration on what makes you feel great. Once you have your space, the next thing will be a few words of dedication. Dedicating your sacred space or altar is not necessarily about dedicating it to an idol or dedicating it to a god or goddess. It's about dedicating it to yourself, to your energy, and for your higher good. So it's not like a woo-woo thing, but it does need a little bit of thought because, again, it's about you and what you want to gain from your sacred space or altar. You might find you just want to say a few simple words, or you may want to do a full-on dedication ceremony, especially if you're following a Wiccan path, because if you are, then maybe you already know about when you're doing your spell work, you might want to dedicate this and make a full-on day about it. A simple way to do this would just be to light a candle and some favourite interest and simply say a few words like, I dedicate this sacred space, altar, to my higher self, goddess, spirit, God, whatever you want to use, and call upon the positive energies to work with me. Very, very simple. Or maybe you could say a blessing upon this home, a blessing upon the hearth, a blessing upon the sacred space. Something like that. That's all it needs to be. If you want to ask a god or goddess to bless your sacred space, perhaps you have their statue on your altar. Here's one for Brigid, for example. I mean, like I've said before, she's the Celtic goddess of the hearth and home, after all. So you say something like, "Oh, Brigid of the well and flame, I ask you to consecrate this space in your name. Bless this house from end to end, side to side, above and below." Very simple. Doesn't have to rhyme if you don't want it to, but if you want to make it rhyme, to make it feel that little bit better, then make it rhyme. I'm sure you can think of much better words to say than I've actually said there. But anything of that nature, whatever feels right for you, and of course you can sit and write your own blessing, dedication, do whatever you want that works with your sacred space. Another thing you can do once you've got your altar space set up is to cleanse the whole of your altar space and any items that you've got on there. This will mean it's ready to work with, and your space is clear, the objects on the altar are clear, and then you can make your dedication. So to start cleansing your space, you can do this in a variety of ways. Cleansing is about removing any negative energy that has attached itself to the items you've bought or even have been given. So, for example, if people have handled crystals in a store that you've purchased them from because they've picked them up and looked at them like we all do, those crystals will take on that energy of the person. It may be only briefly, but it's always a good idea to just cleanse them of anything that's negative so that you're not carrying that into your working space. So you can cleanse your space by using simple items such as smoke clearing or burning oils. It's completely up to you what you feel you're comfortable with. The easiest method would be to just use some incense. Firstly, open a window, let the air run through your room or property. And this has three purposes. Firstly, it's going to let all the negative energy out through your windows and doors. Secondly, it stops you setting off any smoke alarms. And thirdly, it stops you passing out from inhaling any excessive fumes. So do it with intention in your head that you're clearing all your negative energy from the area, the objects. You can see it if you want to visualize it leaving out of the window. If you wish, you can say a few words as you walk around, wafting your smoke around your items and around the room and around the space. The ritual doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be big. And I will cover some incense and ritual cleansing in another podcast at some point. All these things take time for me to write and then I have to double check them in books that I've got them right, especially when it's incense and stuff. So bear with me on that one. But some good incenses to use are following. Palo Santo. This is probably one of the best ones to use for clearing negative energy, because not only does it clear the negative energy, it also brings in positive ones. So it does the job perfectly. You can easily buy it from places like Etsy and online. Find a reputable person who gets it from... it doesn't come from the UK. It's coming from South America and places like that. So find somebody reputable, because it always sort of bothers me that you never know who you're buying these things from. You'll learn its smell. So if someone tries to fob you off with a bit of pine wood, you'll definitely know that you're not burning Palo Santo, because it's got quite a distinctive smell. You'll need to burn it and waft the wood with a fan, or in my case, it's the nearest piece of cardboard I can find, because I never get organised enough to go, oh yes, I have all my things. I'd love to be that person, but I'm not always that organised. You have to keep it burning. You have to keep wafting at the end so that it smokes. Otherwise, it will go out, because it's a little piece of wood. But it is great for clearing off negative energy. You'll also need something underneath it in case there's any ash drops off, because you don't want to mark any furniture. And because it comes as a piece of wood, it's not a cone or a stick that you can burn. The next one would be Nagchampa. Obviously, this is the original smell that we all know from popping into our local crystal healing ooky spooky shop, and it changes the atmosphere from negative to positive. Frankincense has been used for hundreds of years to clear temples, churches, etc. of negative energy, and myrrh combines perfectly with frankincense to combat negativity. Now, I'm sure there are many, many more incenses that you can work with, but if I gave you a great long list, you'd look at it and go, well, which one do I use? So you've got Palo Santo, Nagchampa, frankincense and myrrh to look at. Any of those will work perfectly, because again, it's about intent. It's your intent to clear the negative energy. So my additional advice would be, always use a holder for anything you're burning, or to catch the ash and stop you getting burned, stop your furniture or your floors, carpets, etc. getting burned. Keep them in a safe place. Always have the room well ventilated. Don't burn anything if you've got any form of respiratory issues, asthma, etc. Find something else to do your cleansing with, which we can talk about another time. You can get cleansing oils to use, not even to burn, but to use in a different way. We'll cover that another time. Keep everything away from children, and don't burn anything around animals. I'm sure there's probably some more that you'll think of. You're not stupid. I'm not going to treat you like you are. So think about it before you do it, and just be sensible. And if you're used to burning sort of incense sticks or whatever, make sure you've got someone who again is reputable, because some of the ones that you've bought, I've done it myself. I've been online, found something, I thought, oh yeah, that's it, that's the one I'm after, that's the smell I'm after, fantastic, it's got here, and I've gone, oh, okay, that's Nagchampa, and it's just Nagchampa boxed in something else to make me think it is something else. I've seen this quite a few times. So find yourself someone reputable to buy your products from. So I hope that this may have helped you think about your altar, sacred space, and what you would like to do, whether it's small or large, indoors or out. Having that place to focus our intent really helps us move forward, as we can concentrate all our energies in that area. And if we're doing spell work or energy work, it will also be enhanced because you are within that containment. Take time to think what works for you and what feels right. Obviously, I've mentioned in previous podcasts, and I mentioned earlier about your gut instinct. If it feels right, then do it. So thank you for listening in, and don't forget, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Alchemical Serenity, and I will also link my Patreon page in the show notes below if you'd like to join me there. If you'd like to buy me a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, that would be really nice. And I'll also be adding photos of my altar to my Patreon page in the future, and hopefully some more videos of places that I'm trying to get to. But I hope that you've enjoyed today's podcast. If you have, please give me I was going to say a like or subscribe, but please subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it. But also, if you'd like to just leave me a few notes underneath, just saying, what you've enjoyed about it, because this helps. It gets sent out by, obviously I use the Spotify platform, and Spotify will go, oh, hello, some people like this. They've written something. So if you enjoyed, some positive words would be fantastic, just to know that for me to know that I'm on the right track to help you finding the path that you were born to lead. So bright blessings, love and light, and peace in the beautiful grove of the trees, and I'll see you again very soon.